Hello, my name is Jay Adams. I am a photographer here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Um, I have been, I'm actually a hybrid creative. So I do graphic design, some filmmaking, videography, photography. And so I have been off and on with photography for 26 years. That's wrong. I have been doing photography off and on since high school. I took a photography class when I was a junior, and I put it down and picked it up over the next 20 years. But probably in the last 3 to 4 years, I've been focusing heavily on photography.
My name is Carmen Davis, and I'm the curator of Whose Streets Are Streets, a photography exhibition on display at Rise Chattanooga, featuring the work of Jay Adams. I am originally from Chattanooga, born and raised here, and my career took me to the Bessie Smith Cultural Center. At the time, it was the Chattanooga African American Museum. And I went there as a volunteer, and I stayed for 13 years. In that time, I was able to do everything from events all the way to exhibitions, as well as education. That's all a part of who I am. I always say that my mom basically shaped me to be a curator in a sense, because when we would go on vacations, we would go to museums, we would go to see the Ailey dancers. So it was always cultural or educational for our vacations. So it's definitely in my blood.
I felt really fortunate to be able to photograph the protests here in Chattanooga that were organized by I Can't Breathe CHA. I felt like I was doing my part, right? I was capturing a moment. I was trying to tell the story of what the protesters and the organizers were trying to convey. And it feels great. I feel like I did my part in this particular moment in time.
I first heard of Jay just because same circles, so we knew each other. We've been cool for some years, and he started doing his photography work, and I followed his IG account. And initially it was just beautiful photographs of Black people throughout the city. But once everything started happening with the protests in the city, he started taking photos, going down there and just every day taking photos. And he had hundreds and hundreds of photos, but he would curate on his IG page just different photos from the scenes that he saw when he was shooting. And I fell in love with those photographs because his eye really captures the essence of how the protesters feel, how the police who were there to protect and serve were probably feeling. You got all of those emotions and just the feelings of the organizers and just this movement and the heartbeat of the movement through his photographs. So I mentioned to Shane and James, co-founders of Chattanooga Now Rise, that I felt like we should do an exhibition of his work, and they were feeling the same way. We didn't even know we were having these same feelings at the same time. And we approached Jay about it, and so he agreed to it. And now we have this wonderful exhibition of his work up at Rise Chattanooga.
After having the opportunity to photograph what was going on here in Chattanooga with the protests, I started to post them on social media, and it was extremely important for me to make sure that the story was being told, because the thing that stood out to me the most was people passionately wanting to be heard. You could see it in their faces, you could see it on the signs, you could hear it in their voices. And it was important for me to capture that. And I was able to share that through social media and get a lot of folks in the city to support it. One of them being Rise, and Shane Morrow from Rise approached me about doing an exhibit here. And I was excited because I had always wanted to have my photography printed and framed, and had never done it up to this point and didn't really know how to approach it. And so this allowed me an opportunity to learn a lot about how to move forward with my photography as art. And so we got together, and I was fortunate to have the super talented Carmen Davis curate it. And we sat down, and I think I probably had 25 photos that we sorted through to see which 8 were going to be the 8.
So I've been asked, why did I narrow it down to the photos that are included in this exhibition? Jay gave us roughly 20 photographs to choose from, and it was left up to, originally myself, James, and Jay were supposed to narrow down the photos, but they both said, hey, we're going to turn it over to you because you've been doing work in this space for some years now, and we trust your eye. And so through those 20 some odd photos that Jay provided for us to choose through, I chose the ones that again spoke to the emotion of what was happening on the streets as he was photographing. And some of that is joy, some of that is pain, some of that is despair, worry, fear. All of those things are captured throughout these 9 photos. I felt it was very important, though, to capture kind of the gamut of emotions, and not just that hardcore, we're screaming for our lives, we're screaming for our children's lives, our relatives' lives, not just that part of it, but also those brief moments of joy or solidarity, unity that he also captured through his photos. So that's how we got down to the 9 that we have in the beginning photo of the exhibition, with the gentleman who has himself wrapped up in the flag. I think just speaks volumes to the entire exhibition and the work that we showed.
So one of the first photos that stood out amongst the ones that we chose from was "America, Will You Ever Be Mine?", which is a photo of the young man with the American flag draped over his shoulder. That night of shooting at the protest, I remember seeing him early, and I remember making a mental note, I gotta find the photo of him, just because of the way he looked. It was perfect. And so I found the moment, I captured it, and the actual title of the photo, "America, Will You Ever Be Mine?", is from a song by a group out of Atlanta that's no longer together called Jazz Specs, and it's a song called "Polka Dotted Stripes." And the lyrics of one of the part of the song is, "America, don't you lie to me, I just need for you to tell me the truth. America, will you ever be my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, for thee I sing." And for me, it was just this young black man who is having this intense experience as being a young black man in America. And the visual for me of him draping the American flag over himself was, it was a contrast for me, right? Because there are certain situations that have taken place, like the George Floyd situation and others, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. They are the reason why we're protesting. And it feels sometimes that for young black folks, for black men, for black women in this country, we don't feel that we are a part of America, right? And so to drape the flag over him, it was part like he was staking claim of him being American and asking people to see him. But it was also this contrast of being covered by something that for a lot of black folks in history have not been covered by America. The second photo is titled "Are You Listening?" It was from the second night that I went out to capture some photos. That night was different from the following nights because the CPD, they were kind of very close to the action and not causing any trouble. They actually, they were pretty understandable out there, but there were a number of times where 1 or 2 police officers were in the direct path of the march. And so the protesters took those opportunities to kind of be demonstrative and whether it be kneeling or whether it be, having conversations with the police officers, some of them losing their cool and being disrespectful, but for the most part, it seemed like there was a desire for a dialogue. And in this particular photo, The protesters were kind of surrounding this officer with his vehicle behind him, and the young lady in front of him, I forget her name, forgive me, was asking him questions about being supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement, and specifically asking him if he would take a knee with the protesters, and the conversation went back and forth. It was a very, very, very intense moment, but it was one of my favorite pictures that I've ever captured. The third photo is titled "Keep Moving Forward." It is a photo of protesters in front of the Tomorrow building. Aesthetically, I love the photo. I love the angle. It just looked really good to me. It stood out for me. And then, of course, there's a metaphor in it with it being the Tomorrow building that they're marching in front of. And that was why I called it "Keep Moving Forward," because the idea for me is no matter what we endure, no matter what is going on with the world, we have to keep moving forward into tomorrow. And that's a photograph that I really enjoy. The next photo is titled "Time, Circumstance, History." It is based off a James Baldwin quote, which says, "I am what time, circumstance, history have made of me, certainly, but I am also much more than that. So are we all." I titled it this because a time, circumstance, and history is, I don't know the gentleman who is in the front, but when I see this photo, I see a photo of a Black man leading people. And when I thought about the James Baldwin quote in this particular moment in time, right? I don't know who this gentleman is. He was on fire. He was out there the first couple days, and I never got to meet him, but his energy was crazy, and this was obviously very important to him, and it seemed to be a part of his identity. And so in my mind, if I can make up the movie of his life in my head, he is in a position now where he is leading these people in a protest due to time, circumstance, and history. But just as it said in the James Baldwin quote, he is much more than that, and so are we all. The next photo in the exhibit is titled "Desperate for Justice." It was from the same night as Time, Circumstance, History, and Are You Listening? And that particular night, as I said before, CPD officers were somewhat in the path of the protesters, and so there was a lot of conversation and dialogue and moments of demonstration. And in this particular moment, I just remember seeing, in a moment of demonstrating, there's this woman and this man, and they both got down, right? Her on her knees, he on the ground. And I just jumped in front of them, tried to take a couple photos. And the reason why I titled is there's something in her eyes that seems desperate. And him, of course, taking the posture of laying down on the ground, which is extremely vulnerable, and which is also the position that George Floyd was in. And there's a moment of desperation in the photo that was just super intense to capture, and I feel fortunate to be able to have done so. The next piece is titled "Rage Against the Dying of the Light," which is actually the last line of a poem by Dylan Thomas titled "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." I think if you're familiar with the poem, and when you look at the photograph, it is somewhat self-explanatory. Part of it from an aesthetic standpoint is I just wanted to do my best to capture the protesters in front of the sunset that evening. And I was actually really glad that I caught this one, because for some reason it was really difficult for me to find that shot. And I remember capturing this one and having a huge sigh of relief. But then also symbolically, it makes sense to me, right? In a protest, in this particular protest, as I'm capturing things, the word rage does pop up for me, because there were some people who, they were letting some things out that night. It was a very cathartic moment. And so the idea of the protesters literally walking into night because they're walking toward the sunset, and it was just it just popped in my brain and made sense, and I'm super glad that I caught it. The next piece is titled "My Brother's Keeper." It is actually from the first night of the protest here in Chattanooga. And to be honest, I wasn't even sure if I was gonna go out and take photos. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little afraid. But I was photographing, and I was photographing something downtown that night. And when I finished, it was like almost midnight, and I just had my camera with me, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna go see what I can capture. And it was extremely intense, the most intense night, because again, this is the first night. This is even before the organizers kind of started getting things together. And so this was, because it was late, these are just the last folks out there who are protesting. And we're sitting, and at this point, CPD kind of directed the protesters down the Market Street Bridge to right in front of Buffalo Wild Wings and Lucky Leprechaun or whatever those are. And the police wanted all the protesters to stay up on the sidewalk. And so it was literally almost a standoff. Police officers on one side and protesters on the other. And what I kept noticing that night is there were people who were enraged for whatever reason. And they had friends or family there holding them back or trying to calm them down. And it was beautiful in the sense because they weren't telling them to be quiet. It was obviously, I'm gonna let you get this off your chest, but I am going to protect you. And I was trying my best again to find the right moment, right, to the right photo to capture that. And this was the photo. And I think on a deeper level, it was beautiful to see that, right? To see Black men be supportive in allowing a friend of theirs or their brother to get some things off their chest and to express themselves. But in the same breath, they were there to protect them and keep them from going too far. And I think that's the ultimate definition of being my brother's keeper. So the last photo of the exhibit, I don't know if it's my favorite or if the first America Will You Ever Be Mine. I just aesthetically, I just love this photo, especially being a Chattanoogan, right? The Tivoli is an iconic building, and the marquee and all of it. And it was just, it's perfect to me to catch the Tivoli, to have a message about George Floyd on the marquee, to have the protesters in front of it. From an aesthetic standpoint, I love the photograph. And it was, it's one of my favorites. I think there is a deeper meaning, and why I named it Peace and Love with the ellipses at the end is, this is not directed necessarily at anybody in Chattanooga or even directed at the Tivoli themselves, but it's very easy for us to put something on a marquee, but we have to make sure that we are taking action outside of that. And so that's kind of why the ellipses are in the title. Just, we presented peace and love, now, but then what? I have so much gratitude for being able to not only capture this moment in history, but to also have my photos exhibited through Rise. I have been, and quarantine and COVID-19 has kind of been the catalyst, but I have been going through the transition of seeing photography just as a service to actually seeing it as an art form and as a medium for art. And so I am approaching my photography more as art, as opposed to just a dude picked up a camera and took some great pictures. And so moving forward, I don't know what the specifics are going to be. I know that we are going to do more with this particular exhibit, and I'm very excited about it. But unfortunately, in the COVID-19 world, it's kind of difficult to see what the next move is going to be. But the one thing that I know is that I feel good because I'm in a very creative place and looking at other ways to take photos, other ways to present it, even collages and adding poetry to it. The sky is the limit. And so I'm in a space of being creative right now. Not sure what the next move is gonna be, but if you follow me on Instagram, which is where most of my photography can be found, it's j_adams_creative. Whether it be through my stories or the photos that I post, I'll definitely be able to keep everyone abreast as to what I'm doing next. But I'm super, super, super excited about the future. I just need for COVID to go in and lift up so we can do exhibits and fun things, and I can go to more events and take photos. But until then, I'll be in creative mode, and I'm excited about it.